Well, that was the verdict being rendered in the Roy Oliver case. That was from yesterday, and I'm with Joseph Scott Morgan and Charles Mittelstadt. You can't get any better, guys, than the work that these gentlemen do. I've been on with them, breaking this case down on a number of occasions. I'm just going to throw out a personal thing, guys. And Charles, I'll start with you. There's something about that moment where the defendant is standing up and you're a lawyer or you're on the defense team and the jury is rendering that verdict. And I've often wondered in all the years I've done this that I've never seen anyone just pass out after they've been convicted, because you can only imagine what's going on with them physically and psychologically.
I agree, Bob. I've had the same thoughts over the years, and I've stood next to countless, literally hundreds of defendants in my career in that circumstance, and I've wondered the exact same thing. And the only thing I can figure is that they've had so much time to think about the possible outcomes to a case that it must be so overwhelming and almost surreal when that verdict comes in, especially a guilty verdict, that there may be some form of shock going on.
Yeah, and Joseph Scott Morgan can not be a better guest as well, because you have been in multiple jurisdictions handling cases for many years, written many articles, books. So my question to you is that the speed with which these things are being done here in Texas, this is typically much faster than what would be happening in New Jersey. There would be pre-sentencing reports by the court. You'd be given an opportunity to do sentencing memorandums and then put on a case. What's your experience been with regard to how fast this is moving?
Yeah, it's kind of dazzling, Bob. You know, the first thought that I had, you mentioned just a moment ago that I'm a science guy. We've moved into a different phase here. And one of the things that I would be more comfortable with is if they put this guy on a couch somewhere with a forensic psychologist and sit down and talk about his experiences with PTSD and the war, and also how that kind of folds over into his practice as a law enforcement officer, to paint a more numerical picture of what's going on here. We have some testing framework here.
Yeah, I agree completely. Maybe they're going to do that. We don't know. But I agree completely with both of you guys. We're going to go to a break, and on the other end, we'll come back with more. Well, if you need a proof beyond a reasonable doubt that we are doing a lot here at the Law&Crime Network, let me give you some updates. In the Kilgore case, now, this is where the victim, Jerry Donridge, 72 years old, was a pawn shop owner, and she is on trial for having shot, stabbed, set the pawn shop on fire. This case, again, has gone like lightning, and we are getting ready. She took the stand and I'm getting ready. There's a picture of her right now for closing statements, which we're going to try to get to you here at the Law&Crime Network. And the Liggins case is something that's going to be coming up this week. I want to talk to you guys about this case because I've got a personal problem with what is happening here. I know I'm a prosecutor, but because of that, I respect what it is that we do. This is from a 1990 horrible, horrific 9-year-old Jennifer Ann Lewis, who was sexually, there's a picture of her right there, that beautiful young girl. She was sexually assaulted and killed. He was found guilty of that. His convictions were reversed 2 times by higher level courts, more recently because 77 police reports and a transcript of one of the main witnesses in the case on identification on a very circumstantial, weak case was withheld from the defense for over 25 years. And now the witness that could testify about that, the officer's dead. And so there's a real serious problem in my mind about why it is this case is allowed to continue. And I say that as a prosecutor. This has to end with regard to the withholding of information. It's not right. It's not fair. And the case, in my opinion, should have been thrown out. Nevertheless, he's going on trial again. And there's a picture of him from when he's a young man, and there he is now as an old man. So let's watch out for that one. And I hope Law&Crime has me going all over that case, because I just don't like what prosecutors did. I say that as one myself. And in the Hubers case, Shayna Hubers, hey, any shock? They came back like lightning, guilty on murder with respect to the murder of her lawyer boyfriend. I put lawyer in there, I don't know why, but maybe because I am one. But nevertheless, there There's a picture of her. She went down. Hey, team prosecution did great yesterday in the United States of America. They were scoring top-level murder convictions all over the case. Shayna Hubers is one of them. And we'll be back with that case with you. And then on the Oliver case, the Roy Oliver case where we are right now, there he is in his uniform, and there's what he's going to be looking like for a really long time. We're in the sentencing proceeding right now. There's one more witness, his common-law wife, that's expected to testify in the case. Folks, we are on fire here at the Law&Crime Network. Dan Abens production. And even better than that, you guys know I love the top crime stories. So we're going to get back to that with our two great guests, Joseph Scott Morgan and Charles Mittelstadt. We'll talk more law and crime as soon as we get back from the crime stories.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on lawandcrime.com and across the country. A teen in Ohio who went missing 6 days after reportedly witnessing his father's brutal murder at the hands of his mother and her lover was found safe in Dayton. 15-year-old Jacob Caldwell was found with 4 adults in a home in Sugar Creek Township after authorities received a tip to his whereabouts. Jacob went missing a year ago after witnessing his mother, Tawny Caldwell, and her boyfriend, Sterling Roberts, murder his father, Robert Caldwell, in front of him and his younger siblings. Tawny Caldwell and Sterling Roberts are in jail facing murder charges, and the 4 adults Jacob was found with could face charges for allegedly hiding him. An unidentified man is claiming he had a 10-month-long sexual relationship with accused killer Chris Watts. Watts is accused of killing his wife Shannon and his 2 daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste. The man claims Watts told him he was trapped in a loveless marriage. In April 2012, Watts released this video offering relationship advice when dealing with why marriages fail.
Sometimes people, when the relationship starts to dissolve, repair is not an option and they want to get away and start new. When you want to go into repair, you need to analyze what went wrong and consider what ways of solving the problems.
Before Watts was arrested, he begged the public for help finding his family.
I just want them back. I just want them to come back. And if they're not safe right now, that's what's tearing me apart. Because if they are safe, they're coming back. But if they're not, this has got to stop. Like, somebody has to come forward.
Watts now faces 5 counts of first-degree murder and 4 other felony charges. Investigators in Texas are searching for a woman wearing broken wrist shackles and a T-shirt caught on surveillance camera ringing a doorbell of a home before running off. Other neighbors in the Sunrise Ranch area of Montgomery reportedly saw the woman ring several doorbells to no avail before fleeing. Other neighbors in the Sunrise Ranch area of Montgomery reportedly saw the woman ring several doorbells to no avail before fleeing. The identity and whereabouts of this woman remain a mystery, and authorities are investigating the possible connection to a missing person. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
Well, welcome back. Hey, guys, that last story was really something. So since we have your expertise, Joseph Scott Morgan, as well as Charles Mittelstadt, who are investigative kind of forensic guys, you're involved in kind of trying to solve stuff. What did you make of that tape, Charles, right now in your mind? How would you be going about investigating? Like, what went on with that half-dressed girl with shackles on her arms?
Well, clearly and legitimately, law enforcement has grave concerns, right? Here's a girl who rang on multiple doorbells. It looks like she might be in some sort of distress. She has these restraints on her hands. And, this is something, by the way, that wouldn't even have been possible a few years ago. It's only because of all of these surveillance systems like the Ring doorbells and so forth out there that we even know about this sort of thing. But as I understand it, law enforcement has done the appropriate thing so far, which is really to canvass the area. But clearly they have concerns that this woman may have escaped some sort of captor and may have been recaptured before getting the assistance that she was trying to get.
Yeah, and Joseph, something that to me was a little odd is, and again, this person could be drugged, she could be captive, it could be a million different things. Was that it didn't seem like a frenetic activity of walking up to those number of doors. It didn't say she wasn't yelling, she wasn't screaming, she wasn't really moving around a lot. But obviously something is awry. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. Her gait and pace were kind of interesting. She gripped the side to kind of balance herself. Something else that's kind of compelling about this, Bob, is the fact that She looks like she's only wearing a T-shirt. If you take a look at that, I don't see shorts or anything. And to boot, she's barefoot. So I can't imagine that she had traversed a lot of terrain to get to this point. I would like to see them, and I hope, and I'm sure that they will, to take this image, freeze it, and digitally enhance it so that they get a clearer image of her face, get it out on the net so that everybody can see this thing, not just the local neighbors, but somewhere this gal might have been snatched from.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. And I was kind of thinking the same thing, Charles, that if I were prosecuting a missing persons case or a case where I didn't know who the person was, the first and foremost important thing to do, if you can do it without risk of death or serious injury to somebody, is use the public to help you out, because I think that they could probably clean up some of those images pretty well. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, with regard to the image cleanup, I've had some experience with that in cases, and frankly, you can clean things up a little bit, but I've never had the sort of success that I would hope for in terms of enhancing these sorts of images, particularly with when you're dealing with a low light situation like this, auto iris, and you're just basically dealing with trying to engineer, modify pixels, and it's harder to do. But absolutely, this is a case that should involve the public, and I think that's the best way of trying to get some sort of identification and some answers about this.
Yeah, it's at one point in that shot, you do have a pretty good close-up image in my mind, at least enough that if somebody knows her, they would understand her cadence, her walk, things of that nature.
Right.
Guys, couldn't have two better guys than you for today. I'm really glad you're my guest. We're going to go to a break, and on the other end, we'll come back with more fascinating stuff. Well, there you go, man. It's a chilling, body cam footage. Joseph Scott Morgan and Charles Mittelstadt, I want to ask you a question. When we were doing all of this and going through the case, and at the end of the case, the judge gave an opportunity for the jury to come back manslaughter, and they didn't do that. They came back with the murder conviction. And we had talked about the mechanics, and I'll throw this first to you, Joseph, of the actual scene, and you would like to see more of the science. Do you think there's still a part of the jurors, though, where they say, look, we came back with murder, but we understand that this was an unfolding situation, shots are being fired, his co-officer is demanding that vehicle stop, so even though he didn't see something, he was now alerted to that vehicle. Is this mitigation in your mind for them?
I don't know. They had the distinct opportunity to come back with manslaughter, but they did in fact come back with murder. So I would say that this is probably a failure on the defense's part here, because those two things are clearly delineated here. And so no, I don't think it's a mitigating factor. Just the fury of this thing, and you can see in this imagery how the vehicle is in retreat. He makes that one statement: they were trying to hit you. I don't know if that's when they were pulling away or what the case might be, because the thing is so disorienting, when you're watching it. And so that's one of the really important reasons why it has to be broken down scientifically, where you can go back out and restructure this thing so that people can appreciate it. But yeah, I think they missed the mark. Hey,
Charles, one other thing that I've contended, I'm just being a lawyer here. I'm a prosecutor who wants to win cases, and I want those convictions to be sustained in the appellate division. I mean, how many cases do we have on the Law and Crime Network, like we're talking about just today, but the one we're going to start covering, where they have to be retried again because of some sort of prosecutorial misuse? And there was a lot of testimony that came out about this Facebook post, and then for some befuddling reason, the defense was successful at blocking prejudicial testimony about a road rage incident, then put Oliver on the stand, then elicited the testimony. I've been asking everybody and their brother if they can make sense of this. And my concern about it is that the prosecutor is pouncing on it, not only in the guilt phase, but also in the sentencing phase. I'm wondering, in your mind, from what you've seen in a courtroom, I don't know, as a prosecutor, I wouldn't be doing this over and over again. I'd be afraid, and people have to understand it's about evidence rules, not about right or wrong. It's about evidence rules.
Sure.
That the prejudicial effect is going to outweigh the probative value. You had a judge rule it was prejudicial, it got admitted, and then it keeps coming out. Do you think there's a wiggle room there? As a prosecutor, I would protect against this.
I agree. I think, when in this case, when the defense makes some unforced errors and there's a ruling like that, then the prosecutor really probably would be prudent not to continue to highlight something that could come back and jeopardize their case on appeal. I always felt there was sufficient evidence in this case from the beginning that body camera footage is actually very revealing. My buddy JSM, the science guy, he always wants to break it down scientifically, and he's incredibly eloquent at doing it. But in this case, I think it really betrays Oliver's version. And as you and I have talked about before, Bob, I mean, these cases usually come down to human factors experts who are best positioned to try to put a jury in the mind of that officer and help them understand the decision making that is split second, the shoot don't shoot issues that come into play in these cases. But that body camera footage, in addition to his partner, Officer Gross's testimony, clearly shows that the vehicle was in retreat. It's hard to imagine that, again, it doesn't really show that it's coming at him, contrary to his version. And I'm actually a little surprised that he wasn't charged with making a false statement. I have a very similar case. Well, it's similar in the sense that it involves a moving vehicle and an officer in a shooting. However, in my case, the vehicle is coming directly at the officer. And he actually got charged with making a false statement during the administrative hearing, which the case just got dismissed on a Garrity issue, but it's about to be reindicted. But that in this case, it's hard for me to sustain the fact that he would have felt threatened when the vehicle is clearly retreating and takes an abrupt turn away from him.
Well, getting back to the legal point that I was making just a minute ago, under Evidence Rule 404, which most states have, bad character evidence is not good unless it goes to a very specific thing. The judge ruled it was prejudicial. I want to just give my viewers and the people that are in the chat room what I was taught as a young prosecutor, and I taught when I became the prosecutor. When you stand well, stand still. And if you have good facts and good evidence in the case, stick with that, not extraneous character assassinations, because you could jeopardize the verdict. Nevertheless, very emotional case, and what could be more emotional than what the prosecutor brought out? The fact that Jordan's father, Andell Edwards, will never have the son, watch him grow up, have kids, get married, things of that nature. Let's take a look at his testimony. Wow. There's the carnage that you see from something like this. I'm with Joseph Scott Morgan and Charles Mittelstadt. Guys, that's Dad talking about his kid. And again, we can continue to talk about how the jury emotionally will respond to certain testimonies. That beautiful young boy right there. And let's say all things are considered equal and the witnesses equal them out on both sides, the prosecution and defense, which I don't think is true here. One resonating theme the prosecutor keeps bringing up is the fact in this instance that there's a civil lawsuit which is basically calling these kids gangsters and drug dealers, which all of the evidence completely belies. And the prosecutor is smartly bringing out the fact that this guy has no remorse whatsoever. And I think that all things being equal, these kind of Facebook posts and things like this are going to be really hurtful in terms of the jurors' assessment of Oliver. What do you think, Charles?
They certainly have the potential to be, Bob. And then that's always the interesting dynamic when you have a criminal case alongside of a civil case like this. In my experience, usually the civil case gets stayed until the criminal case is completed. But the fact that this sort of evidence has been, or these sorts of allegations have been suggested, certainly don't bode well.
Yeah, Joseph, what do you think about that? I mean, I know we talked science the other day and how you want to default, and understandably so, to how it happened with exactitude, but that's not where we're at right now. We're at emotions, and I think that these pot shots with the Facebook posts and the civil suit are really harmful. Your thoughts?
Yeah, these are issues of the heart when it comes down to it. This is a dead child, and all the numeric measurement that that I could apply to it as a scientist, it goes right out the window when you come to this. At the end of the day, you're looking at a dad that's up on the stance doing everything that he can to get this child to adulthood, and I almost made it, didn't I? And now this child's gone, and he's away from his family forever and ever. There's nothing that you can go back and do about that. And so that, at the end of the day, is the hard, cold fact of what the jury is going to be faced with in the sentencing phase.
I couldn't have said it any more eloquently. Very good job, guys. I love having you on Law and Crime Network. We're going to be back on the other end of the break. Thank you. Well, welcome back. You know, that is the Angela Denise Kilgore case, the opening statement of the prosecutor. I have Charles Mittelstadt with me. So let me go through, Charles, first your credentials as a criminal defense investigator, security expert, working for some of the biggie Fortune 100 companies and lots of politicians, political people, and famous people. Joseph Scott Morgan, a forensic expert, death investigator, Jacksonville State University, writer, a scholar. Can't have better experts than what we just saw in the prosecutor's opening statement. So let me toss to you, Joseph, first. What do you see in that crime scene, especially as it relates to the glove evidence and the matching that they did with that, as well as the weapons that we later will find out were recovered?
Yeah, I see someone that did a very bad job in trying to dispose of evidence. As a matter of fact, one of the things that always fascinates me about arson cases, which this comes down to at the end of the day, is that a lot of people don't understand when you go to the trouble of trying to incinerate something, you actually create more evidence. And what's going to come out in court here, and I can guarantee you we're going to hear a lot about this, is going to be evidence related to accelerants. What was used in order to initiate this fire. Just looking at the exterior of this building, you can tell the thing's not fully involved. There were some interior shots in there which things were not fully consumed. So it really makes me wonder, did she just introduce these accelerants onto the body of the victim and try to burn him up, essentially? Also, the connectivity between her and the glove, I'll be really interested to see if they recover any kind of DNA samples out of the glove. Also, just from a purchasing cycle, where did she acquire these gloves from? Can you tie that back to someplace she may have bought these from or acquired them from through lot numbers, all these sorts of things? Connectivity is what we deal in forensics, and this case has certainly got a bevy of that.
Yeah. Charles, what are your thoughts? We got 30 seconds. What do you think about everything that you've seen and based on what Joseph just said? You agree, disagree? Anything to add?
And listen, he's the master of forensics there, so I'm never going to disagree with him. But yeah, this is from a defense standpoint, very, very challenging case. We know that there are significant DNA results that do connect her to two pieces of evidence in particular, and there's mixed DNA on both the gloves and on a plaid shirt that are found in her vehicle. So both the victims and her DNA on those things. So those are extremely problematic. Yep. And unless the defense can tee up a doctor who would have given her that advice and all that nonsense about the poison ivy, then this case is laden with challenges for the defense.
And there's her name right on the ledger, just like the previous crime. Law and Crime Network. We're going over to a break. We'll be back on the other end. Okay, welcome back. So that's Dale Watts. I still have with me Joseph Scott Morgan and Charles Mittelstadt. I have my thoughts, guys, but I'm always giving my thoughts first. So let me throw to you first. Joseph, what do you think about her testimony and the power of it in front of the jury?
Yeah, they kind of had to redirect a little bit there that she is not an expert in the field of, topical medicine or whatever, but she has treated people. And I think that she's a valid witness. And, a lot of people out there can identify with having a rash on their hands and this sort of thing. You know that you have to try to dry this thing out to make it heal. It's kind of absurd to think that someone would put rubber gloves over an area to try to, engage the healing process after they put some kind of salve on it.
Right. And Charles, being a criminal defense investigator, when you're looking at it, you got to be able to figure out what the prosecution is going to do so that you can help your client on the defense side of the case. But what are your thoughts about the value of her testimony, Ms. Watts' testimony, with respect to identification of the defendant at or about the time of the crime?
It's problematic, to say the least. I mean, she, Joseph was talking about connectivity before, and it's not just with regard to forensics, but in this case, she's actually putting the defendant at the pawn shop at a specific time. Her memory seems to be very clear in terms of when she left. She ties that into with a visit to Subway, so there's credibility as to that. I will say this is one thing that surprises me in this case, Bob, and I've had several cases that involve pawn shops. One thing that they almost always share in common is that they have extensive video surveillance. That's just sort of the nature of that business. I would assume maybe in this case, because it was a small pawn shop and maybe this wasn't Mr. Ridge's only career, sounds like he had another contract with the Postal Service, that maybe he didn't take this that seriously. But and given the fact that the building wasn't fully involved, you would expect some, but we have none. But right. This witness is hurtful.
Sorry to cut you up. We got to go to a break. We'll be back on the other end. Thank you. Well, welcome back. Okay, listen, unfortunately, I'm going to have to let go because of his busy schedule. Charles Mittelstadt. Let me tell you where to find him. It's at Defense Mind is his Twitter account. I'm sure you can find him all over Google. You put him in there, he pops up all over, and he should. He's with the Mittelstadt firm, criminal defense investigator, security expert. Charles, always great to have you on for your insights. Thanks for hanging in there with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, gentlemen.
Okay, see you soon. All right, I'm still here, though, with Joseph Scott Morgan. He's a forensic expert. He, by the way, you can find him at J.O. Scott at MEDCOLGAL. I think I got that right. Death. Legal death. Okay, I'm doing the best I can here. Anyway, he's a death investigator. He's a professor at Jacksonville University, does excellent work. Guys, we got all sorts of things going on, including the tease of this next case that we're going to be doing at the Law&Crime Network. Please watch this case. I can't wait to speak to our chatters in the chat room and to our viewers. It's against Stanley Liggins. It's a 1990. 1990, 28 years ago case where he was convicted. There he is as an old man now of having killed a 9-year-old Jennifer Ann Lewis. He was convicted 2 times, and in both 1993 and 1995 convictions were reversed. And the last conviction was reversed because all these years later, we find out that prosecutors and police withheld approximately 77 police reports and a transcript of a major witness in the case, failing to explain that he was a paid informant. The identification in that transcript was crucial to the conviction, and it actually is a very, very powerful tool for the defense that they should have had from the very beginning. So you've got to watch that case, because I'm a prosecutor at heart, and I do not like to see evidence being withheld. It doesn't do anybody any good. It could convict innocent people, or even if the person's guilty, it could cause a retrial. You could tell I'm agitated about this and excited. Hey, we don't know all the facts yet. I'm waiting to wait, but I know a guy is back on trial for a case from 1993 and 1995. Was it 3 times a charm? No, I don't think so. That's not justice to me. If I were the judge, case would have been dismissed. You guys have got to watch this. I'm on fire about this case. But let me calm down, because you know what I love best on this show. Every now and again, we get to take a break with the top crime stories. So let's get to it, and we'll be with you on the other end.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. Authorities in Pennsylvania are seeking a person of interest in the murder of a former Playboy model found dead in her apartment last week. 36-year-old Christina Carlin Krapp was found dead in her condo in Ardmore, the victim of an apparent strangulation. The one-time Playboy Playmate's body was discovered after police conducted a welfare check. Investigators are now looking for this man, caught on camera with Carlin Krapp entering her building as a person of interest in her murder. A group of law enforcement officers caught on camera beating a man in Mesa, Arizona will not face charges for the incident. The officers can be seen on video beating 33-year-old Robert Johnson after he ignored orders to sit down. Johnson was reportedly trying to break into an ex-girlfriend's house when he was encountered by officers. The Scottsdale Police Department released a statement saying the use of force was legally authorized and justified, and officers should not face criminal charges. The officers remain on administrative leave pending an internal review. A model in Miami is facing second-degree murder charges after he was caught on camera striking and killing a panhandler with a fishing bat after refusing to give him money. 32-year-old Hivo Gonzalez was arrested and charged with second-degree murder for attacking Pedro Cruz at a Miami gas station. Gonzalez can be seen having a verbal exchange with the panhandler prior to returning to his vehicle and striking Cruz in the head twice with a fishing bat. Cruz later died from his injuries, and now Gonzalez faces a minimum of 10 years in prison if convicted. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
Well, thank you, Anthony. We are on fire. We are all over the place. You remember Shayna Hubers, right? My prediction was another guilty verdict, but a case that had to come back again because of a problem with a juror in that instance. She got retried again. She got convicted again. But the one thing she did differently this time was she took the witness stand. And you knew, if you listened to the 911 call she made and that bizarre and twisted statement that she gave to the police where she said she wanted to give him a nose job, hence she was dubbed the nose job killer, gave him the nose job he always wanted, and then afterwards said, hey, you know, his parents are rich, they can buy a new kid. Well, you knew her taking the stand, if you could call it comedy or a comedy of errors in a murder case, that's what it was. She went down full boat, murder conviction yesterday. Let's take a little recap and look at her testimony because, you know, folks, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen a lot of defendants on the stand, and it doesn't get much more twisted and weird than Shayna Hubers. Sometimes testimony can be so chilling, you just have to freeze. And that's exactly what we just saw there with Shayna Hubers. But all kidding aside, I've got Joseph Scott Morgan with me. And Joseph, I want to ask you from a forensic point of view, because here we're right in your world. What did you think of her testimony versus the physical evidence at the scene?
She's a liar.
Yeah,
what
right.
It comes down to the physical evidence is that this shooting started. She was some distance away. You know, at least in excess of 30 inches away from him when this shooting started. And this is a clear case of overkill. This guy never rose up out of his chair. She advanced on him while she was firing the weapon, and then finally scored a kill shot with him in this, you know, this nose job, as she puts it. This is a brutal killing. She initiated this thing. She advanced on him, shooting him all of the way. And there was, you know, there's not even any disruption at the scene. If you reflect back, they're talking about the cabinets, the bookcases, and all that stuff. All that stuff's intact.
Right.
There's no evidence that they struggled at all. There's no mano a mano here. This is her in a dominant position with a pistol firing at him. And that's what the physical evidence demonstrates very clearly.
Yeah, no, I meant to ask a guy like you this because you would know better than I would, because I'm the guy who would have to consult a guy like you. Is it the evidence is that he was sitting pretty much the entire time until actually he was shot and went down? That was proven to your satisfaction? Because I know you're a very strict science person.
Yeah, it was. And, of course, the body is going to be moved around a bit, you know, when you've got her in this environment with the body. And then, of course, you've got rescue efforts that might be going on as well. So, yeah, but just from the pooling of the blood and the blood spatter itself, yeah, it's indicative of his position being completely juxtaposition to what she is actually betraying here.
Right, and the pooling and the spatters you're referring to, that was on the opposite side of the, like being the opposite direction where she was. In other words, there would be a table between them. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And so this is quite curious to me. Can I make one more point here? And you know, if you don't mind, this doesn't actually have to do with the physical evidence. This has to do with what this gentleman's family has been put through. We talk about the prep work that goes into to putting on a trial like this, and we're doing all of this evidentiary work and everything. I lay the blame for having to go through all of this again squarely on the shoulders of this court. And that's in Campbell County, Kentucky, by the way. This idea that they want to talk about how they're sensitive to the feelings of the family, how they're speaking for those who can no longer speak for themselves, but yet they can't vet their jury members in that first trial to find out if anybody is actually a convicted felon. I think this is a true shame. This goes back to what you were saying about earlier in this other case that's coming to trial, about where things are being excluded and hidden and all this sort of thing. And it speaks volumes about the people that are actually involved in this case.
Yeah, listen, I've had a retry cases, thankfully not my own, and you're bringing the victim's family and all the witnesses through the rodeo again, and the case never gets better for a prosecutor trying it twice, so I could not agree with you more. And I just want to go back to this testimony she made, because to me, Joseph, while your forensic analysis is right spot on and very powerful, I also thought it was very powerful. To me, the most powerful witnesses were the old lady and the old man who lived upstairs. They could say sometimes they heard her whimper, but then that night, when she was saying there was screaming in my left ear and yelling and all this commotion going on, they heard absolutely nothing. In 5 seconds or less, do you think that's a good combination between that and the forensics, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think this was done as a planned event. This is a planned event that this is essentially an ambush of guy. And keep in mind one more thing. She had said, all I have to do is cry, and I'll get him back. Just keep that in mind as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, listen, I love this analysis, Joseph. I could go on and on with you forever, like I would if we were working on a case together. Law and Crime Network. Break. We'll be back on the other end. Okay. Welcome back. Joseph Scott Morgan's been with me for most of my time. Unfortunately, he's got to go. He's a death investigator, worked for the ME's office, coroner's office, Jacksonville State University. He's written books, articles. He does it all. He's Joe Scott on Twitter. And I'm going to try this again. It's at Medco Legal Death. Just look up Joe, J-O-S-C-O-T-T, and you'll get to him. Joe, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
You got it. Okay, folks, listen, Shayna Hubers, I love it. Doesn't get any weirder than that as far as her testimony. We know she was convicted, full boat charges, but let's see how that was all constructed, because like I've always said to you guys, the jury loves to convict out of the mouth of the defendant, and she didn't do herself any favors. Let's go back to her testimony.